and welcome to Deep In Pact, proud member of the Duff Network, where we dive deep into our most besieged work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
That's me, and we're back to talk about Duress 12.8. And yeah, so just in case we needed a reminder of where Blake is at from last chapter, the opening line to this chapter is, "Time to be the monster from the monster movies, I thought." So he's clearly very self-aware of how much of a monster he is being now, and is just on board with it.
Yeah, it kind of really sets the tone for the whole chapter, which is just Blake is... Well, it's not Blake. I still sort of think like he's out of fucks to give. He's just a monster. He kind of knows it. He wavers a little bit as we go ahead, but this immediately sets a tone of Blake bad.
Yeah, I don't even know if I would call it wavering, honestly. Yeah. Do we call him Blake? Do we just call him Spooky Tree now, or what do we do?
I'll keep calling him Blake, but like at the moment when I say Blake, I don't mean Blake the person. I mean Blake the thing that he is right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and he has a few thoughts. Sorry, there's this really funny line near the start where Blake he's thinking about the practitioners like watching the fire, and he thinks hopefully they'd be misled into thinking they'd won by too much, that someone had made a mistake and now the house burned, threatening to let a demon loose. Like, yeah, Blake, hopefully they think that. That's definitely not what actually happened. That would be very misleading. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of like, hi, you fools, I've tricked you into thinking the house is going to burn down, and all it took was me pretty much burning the house down. Yeah, I mean, there's another bit later where he thinks, I hoped the fire hadn't raged out of control. It shouldn't have, but stranger things had happened. It's like stranger things than like you lighting a bunch of wood around a wooden house on fire and it catching light. Like, that's not that strange, Blake.
Yeah, so strange.
Yeah, I mean, There's a number of beats in this chapter, I think, where Blake feels incredibly sort of hypocritical and self-unaware, and these thoughts around the fire, I think, are some of the most obvious. That's actually kind of a good thing, though, right? Because there's these little bits of him, and there's little thoughts he has throughout the chapter where it kind of feels like he hasn't fully signed on to being an evil monster. Like, he kind of wants to be a good one.
Well, yeah, he's still dextering, right? He's still only killing the baddies, at least.
Yeah, I guess. But it's like, you know, we haven't reached the point where he's just like, oh yeah, the fire might rage and let the demon out. Like he's not thinking that's good yet, so that's something.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's something. It means that he at least has some people that he doesn't want to die. So that's the bare minimum, I think.
Yeah.
So Blake thinks. Blake is basically describing his movement and how he feels kind of like he's moving through treacle a bit until once I found my momentum, though my body remained pliable. Only movements that broke from the flow elicited the noises of breaking and creaking wood or scrapes of wood against bone. And this is great, right? Like he's very literally like gathering momentum and then able to move better. It's so Blake, and it's very much a red flag, and this chapter is full of red flags. It's so full of red flags, they should call it a Chinese flag shop, honestly.
Yeah, it's great how Pact can just jam metaphors into the world like this. Like this, you're right. This is it's so Blake. It's also so boogeyman. Like you said, it becomes a red flag because we're like, no, we don't want him to have momentum in that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, remember when he wanted to like break the system? Like he's like rejecting the Seal of Solomon because he's like, that system's bad and we need to get rid of it. It kind of just feels like he's fallen into the worst system. Like it's like when you fall through the cracks of the Seal of Solomon world, you end up in the Abyss's rules.
Yeah.
Like this is not better, I don't think.
Yeah, it's like, you know, I don't want to play by those rules, so let's just have total anarchy and we can do whatever the fuck we want, instead of being like, so I'll follow these other set of rules.
Speaking of like of great imagery as well, right before that line you just brought out about Blake's like momentum and pliability, there's a line where Blake sort of notices how well Evan and Green Eyes slip into the world and just sort of fit into their surroundings, whereas he sticks out like a sore thumb. And I mean, again, it's just another red flag, I guess. It's just like he's just so out of sync with the world, and he's just he's just trouble.
Yeah, definitely, right. And speaking of trouble, the gang here sneaks up on a group of Duchamps and prepares to murder them.
So let's just get this out of the way. Fuck Blake for getting Evan into this, right? I'm so mad at him.
Yeah, this is something I want to touch on, actually, is Evan's reaction to this, or lack of reaction, because whether it's Blake ignoring it or not, we just don't see Evan be not on board with this at any point, right? He's playing along, and maybe he hasn't really considered the implications of what they're doing, but by the end of the chapter, it should be abundantly clear, because Evan does help them kill 4 people.
Yeah, so at this point in the chapter, I was working off the assumption that Evan didn't understand what Blake was about to do and would surely call him out on it later, but no, I mean, Evan kind of seems to be on board with some. I guess I can't wait to see the fallout from the ending of this chapter and hopefully get a bit of a better idea on where the hell Evan's at right now. Because, you're right. He's sort of concerningly accepting of everything that goes on in this chapter.
Yeah, and, we've fallen far enough that I'm hoping Rose is going to be the one to bring some context and perspective here, which is not something I thought I would say.
Yeah, remember 2 arcs ago when Rose was the one being influenced out of control? Yeah. Well,
it's like a fucking arms race to the bottom of the barrel with these two. I swear to God.
Yeah, but like, I love this because like it's just involving Evan in all this. You're just thinking like
this is a child. This is a child.
Well, yeah. Well, wait, not even Narco. 3 chapters ago, if somebody else had put Evan in situations like this, Blake would have tried to kill them. Like his whole thing, he used to want to protect Evan. Now he's putting Evan, into fighting. I mean, maybe it's just that whole thing, like, is this worse than bringing Evan into her? Or he tried not to bring Evan into her. So, you know what? Yeah, like, fuck Blake. Like, again, it feels very hypocritical. This is not what old Blake would have done.
Yeah. So, on a lighter note, as the group are watching these Duchamps, they're basically just shit-talking the Behames, which is relatable. I love it. I'm on board with it.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. And I think it kind of puts you in that lol, the Behames are so stupid mindset that the story has kind of established. And obviously, I think that leaves you more vulnerable to how the chapter ends.
Yeah. So Blake approaches one of these Duchamp practitioners who is by herself on the phone and holds her at sword point, preparing to execute her.
Remember 2 chapters ago when I said Blake was the heart and soul one?
Yeah. Good times. Happier times.
So long ago. No. Like, I was actually wondering, like, if he's given them up, does that mean Rose has gotten them? Like, are we just going to meet a super nice and chill Rose now? Probably not. Probably not. Like, I don't honestly believe that, but it would be funny.
Yeah. So this woman is on the phone with her daughter as Blake is preparing to kill her. And she honestly handles the situation pretty well. She basically finishes this conversation with her daughter, knowing that she is going to die, that she is about to die, and tries to leave her daughter in the healthiest psychological shape possible for that, which is a tough needle to thread.
Oh, this whole bit, man. Like, it's there's a number of moments here where I'm going to pull out where it feels like Blake feels like a supervillain. Yeah. But this is the one where he just feels like a straight up like evil serial killer. Like the bit where she literally sheds a tear and it lands on Blake's hand, and it takes him a while to realize that he hasn't accidentally cut. Like he doesn't understand what the tear is. He never even consciously makes the connection. Like the reader's left to draw the connection themselves.
Is Blake an idiot? Is Blake an idiot? I mean, we've gotten this far without asking this question, but I feel like we've gotten to the point where Blake is an idiot.
I actually think there might have been a time back in like Arc 3 where we called him an idiot, but I mean, it reminds me of like, remember when Rose didn't used to get like bits of sarcasm or something? Yeah. It wasn't quite that, but she just sort of miss the intricacies of what some people say. It
back
kind of feels
in like
that,
Arc 1 or 2.
Yeah, this is that with like basic human emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It actually like I mean, okay, so the spoilers for Worm. Like, I don't want to drag Worm into this too much, but particularly this bit just reminded me a lot of Spec. As Taylor loses herself to the violence of her shard. Obviously, like Blake has, I think, lost touch with so much of his humanity to this violent Abyssian nature. There's some similarities there, and I mean, I think Wobbo is probably working off the assumption at this point, as he's writing this, that most people reading this read Worm. And so I think I think that parallel may not be entirely accidental. Like it could be because I think this hits you so much harder having read Worm, because you're like, no, we already lost the last protagonist. She died because of this. She's dead.
No, she's coming back.
We lost Taylor to something very similar. So it's sort of hitting us in that same sore spot basically. Yeah. But yeah, like I think not noticing the tear, I think is just really a sign of, or sorry, not comprehending what the tear is instantly is really just a sign of how far removed Blake is from his humanity right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I agree with that, and I'm reminded of the same thing. I think there is an alternate read, though. I think the alternate read is that he just is in denial about it. Like he doesn't. It's not that he doesn't know that it's a tear, because I don't know. Even Blake, I struggle to think that he's that out of touch with humanity. But just that as soon as that thought even starts to process, he just has to shut it down, because he just can't do what he's doing now, do what he feels like he needs to do, while also, letting himself be in touch with any remnant of his human flesh that is still remaining.
Yeah, no, I totally think that's what's happened, because when it first hits him, he thinks maybe it's blood, and then he sort of realizes it's not blood, and then he just nopes out of that train of thought. Yeah, and I mean that was classic Blake. Like he used to do that a lot with various things. He had some things like family or his his past, where he would just nope out of the thought process. Like, as his mind started going there, he's like, no, let's talk about something else. And this kind of feels like that, but it's with what he's doing, not something in his past.
Yeah. So Blake forces this woman, Joyce, to swear an oath of non-confrontationalness before he lets her go without brutally murdering her, which is so nice of him.
I mean, maybe the current situation has lowered my standards for what's okay. That's my new summary for Pact.
Yeah.
But I like this as a solution to the problem. Like threatening to kill people until they swear to stop being a problem. You could do worse, and he does later. Like we're about to see that, but
you can and will do worse.
But I don't hate this as a strategy for getting people to calm the fuck down.
Yeah, can we talk about whether this was actually his strategy though? Because
no, it wasn't.
There's this part of it where he sees Evan, and Evan cocks his head, and then Blake is like, "Maybe I'll give her a chance. Swear an oath to me." Blah blah blah, and that means to me, my read is Blake would have just killed her if Evan wasn't here watching, right?
No, I that was 100% my understanding as well. There's the bit he's basically holding the knife to her, and then he starts asking the questions right after that line about Evan cocking his head. I think that's the connection we're meant to make. Yeah. So once again, thank God for Evan.
Yep. And so the next thing that Joyce does, this woman, is she gets one of the other practitioners to come with her. And we'll talk about this in a second, but I think, Blake letting her live helps here. It helps him not have to fight as many practitioners, right, explicitly. And it helps him on his quest to kill the baddies and not the goodies, right? So, brutally murdering people at first sight, Blake, not always the way. Which he seems to learn for this encounter, but then when he sees the Behemoths later, he just fucking goes in sword slashing, right?
Yeah, but the guy had an annoying voice that he recognized.
Oh, yeah. So, sorry, yeah, that's right. That's
justified.
That's a crime punishable by death, I think.
Yeah. I think you're right though that it's important that this proves to be a very helpful thing to do. He lets this woman live, and it works out. Yeah. And he doesn't process that part. Yeah.
So yeah, Blake interprets her. Basically, Joyce calls away one of the practitioners, Gale, and tells them to come with her back home. And since this woman has sworn an oath not to do anything against Blake, basically to only do something if it helps Blake, Blake interprets this as her basically saying Gale deserves to live and the rest deserve to die. So good luck.
Yeah, it's I mean the more this went on, and by the end of this, I think I'm now fairly confident that Blake was maybe correct in this assumption.
Yeah, in this read of what Joyce was implying to him here.
Yes, but it took me a while to agree with him on this, and I'm very concerned at how quickly he jumped to this assumption. Uh,
Yeah.
it's because it's cold. Like, damn, Joyce.
Yeah, and the fact that Joyce does this is basically like her signing off on it happening, which is the exact kind of approval of his actions that Blake doesn't need right now.
It reminds me of that whole thing with the families in town and the goblins that we saw in Signature. Like, where we sort of condemn them for just like allowing this sort of stuff to go on.
Yeah, it's true. Oh man, things have just gotten worse and worse in this story, haven't they? Remember when that was the ethical question of the day?
Yeah.
Oh, how nice it would be to be back in those times.
I mean, part of me keeps thinking, okay, surely we've hit rock bottom by the end of this chapter. Like, I feel like we're going to have to start to pivot back upwards with Blake and all that. But, like, also, I think I thought that in, like, Arc 9. So, God, I can't wait to read the rest of this story. Like,
yeah, there's still 4 arcs left.
I know. I'm like, either we've hit rock bottom now and we're about to sort of pivot back up towards the end.
I'm sure
like,
it'll be that.
Yeah, or it's just going to keep getting worse and I'm going to be freaking out the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. Yeah, no comment, I guess.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all good.
Also, there's an interesting thing brought up here where Blake can't really hear the bell anymore. I don't know. I just wonder what that's about. I feel like that's going to be something that makes sense in a little bit. This feels like, dropping the seeds for something because, like, one of the things this one person in this group of Duchamps brings up, which is a good point, is that, like, why haven't they gone and stopped the bell yet? Like, from everything we've seen, it's been riling everyone up, and presumably that's not what everyone wants in general.
Yeah, I kind of want to talk about this. Like, the bell, conceptually, I feel like we haven't explicitly seen what it's doing, right? We still don't really know what it's doing, but we haven't seen it tangibly have any effect. But the way that things have gone and how quickly things have gone to shit, it makes it hard for me to not think that the bell is playing some part in this.
No, I mean, my assumption of the bell is it's basically been... It's like the tension, the tense music in a horror movie where it's like just ramping up the tension. Like, it's just setting everybody's sort of tenseness and like a little bit higher and just pushing them that little bit closer to snapping. So it doesn't have like this direct effect, but it's just like, because it's affecting everyone a little bit, it makes it easier to tip things over the edge.
Yeah.
And like, one of my reads is that Blake is already over the edge. So like, he's just not really hearing the bell because it's just not having an effect on him anymore.
Oh, interesting. I like that. Yeah. I can kind of look back through the past, arc or so and think, okay, so the fact that the others were so ready to attack the house, possibly Bell influenced. The fact that the junior council wasn't super keen to form any kind of alliance, possibly Bell influenced. Like, some of these things that could have gone better if not for the Bell. That's how I'm kind of tracking its influence, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's putting everyone just a little bit more on edge, which makes it harder to work together and makes it easier for things to go to shit.
So actually, a thought has just occurred to me. So if we track the thread here, let's say the meeting, Blake's meeting with the junior council, it went really badly in some part because of the bell, right? I think that's a fair thing to say.
Yeah, I don't know how well it would have gone without the bell, but like...
Sure, but it did seem to really fall apart towards the end. And this was what made Blake decide that he needed to prove to the others how bad things were going to get, which meant that he awakened the Thorburns, which ultimately led in...
Oh, so no, what was the word we're using? Not awakened, it's... Oh,
sorry. Initiated? What was it?
Initiated, yes. That was what we wanted.
He initiated the Thorburns, which ultimately led to Callan's death. So, Molly indirectly caused her brother to die by ringing this bell.
Yeah, somebody go tell her that and maybe she'll shut up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
anyway, I guess, well, I'm thinking we'll hear a bit more about the bell next arc.
Yeah, we'll see. So the remaining 4 practitioners do kind of notice Blake and Green Eyes, and this inevitable fight breaks out. And Green Eyes really ramps it up to 11 straight away by jumping on one of the practitioners and eviscerating them. Degloving their midsection is the terminology used here. And it's a very quick and brutal, kill to immediately set the tone of, this isn't fucking Harry Potter shit where we're throwing curses and hexes at each other and pieces of paper and shit. This is like in the mud.
I mean, well, the thing is, I don't think quick and brutal kill gives the impression that Jan died
sorry.
quickly.
Quick and brutal incapacitation, slow kill.
It was the mortal wound was dealt quickly, but the actual end of mortality did not take place for a couple of minutes, I think. I mean, this bit is this was so fucking good to read. Like, it blew me away. I think the writing really sells it, because Wildbow doesn't tell you what happened in detail. Like, he doesn't explain the degloving. What he does is he goes on a little bit of like a side note, and just sort of Blake just introduces the concept of degloving in case you're not familiar with it. And then once you sort of got a handle on it, and then he's just like, and yeah, so basically her whole midsection was degloved. It's like, he hasn't told you what it looks like. He's given you the building blocks and you do it to yourself.
Yeah, he describes the concept of degloving and like other situations where it happens, and then says, and that happened to her midsection. And it's like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. Like rather than getting bogged down in the actual visceral detail of what happened, he makes you do it yourself, and that somehow makes it so much more confronting. It's great.
Yeah, except there's one bit where he says, I didn't pull out the exact line, but it's something like, it looked like the skin of a chicken. I can't remember what the fuck it was, but like loose dangling skin, like on some kind of animal.
Yeah, well, Green Eyes crawls off and the skin is all still attached to her, and Blake just comments that it was like a snake hide or something, like trailing off behind her.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes. A canvas of bloody skin still hooked to her tail is the part that I'm...
That's so much worse than what I said.
Yeah, sorry. I just had to read out the word just so that we could all feel the brutality of this. Yeah, and so let's talk about Green Eyes and Blake here, right? Because, I mean, we touched on last chapter on Green Eyes' influence on Blake and what our read on was it. And I still don't know where I land on this. Like, it's potentially obviously problematic because she is so ready to kill, but also... I don't know. It just like, she also feels a lot more sure in who's evil and who's not, which maybe is a good thing and maybe is a bad thing. I don't fucking know.
I don't know. With everything going on with Blake, I don't trust people who have instincts on good and bad right now.
Yeah, fair enough. Especially not if that comes from the abyss, potentially.
Yeah. I mean, something we've sort of failed to talk about, even when we've specifically talked about Green Eyes, is kind of like what's she going through? Like, even when we had that tiny snippet of an interlude of hers in 11.x, you know, that was all sort of so positive, but it was so brief as well. Like, she's emerged from the drains very much like a boogeyman. Like, she's got this hunger for human flesh that seems pretty difficult to satiate, honestly. Like, she's pretty good at eating tonight, and she still seems hungry.
But also, she doesn't seem to need to feed on it that much. Like, it hasn't been a problem that she hasn't been able to.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously we get a bit later that we'll dive into a bit when we get there as well, but we learn a bit more about her backstory, sort of, that it's just a bit tragic. I don't know, like, I guess something I just hadn't been paying enough attention to was what's been happening to Green Eyes. Because we didn't know her before she was Green Eyes, it was sort of easy to forget that, like, she's going through her own shit that's abyss-related as well.
She's very, very positive, right? And it means that it's hard to, like, we don't stop and think, actually, what's going on with her, because it seems like she's just really happy all the time.
Yeah, and so watching her do this stuff here was finally the bit where I was like, man, you know, she's being affected by this stuff a lot too, huh? Because I assume when she was a human, she did not behave like this.
I mean, you never know.
But yeah, I mean, what's interesting is because you brought up this idea that Green Eyes might be a bad influence on Blake. I was actually wondering if he's maybe a bad influence on her. Like, you know, we've talked a bit about, like, Blake had that vision in the drains where he was becoming a bit of a cult leader himself, a bit of an abuser, as he put it.
Yeah.
And now, like, he's really sort of taken Green Eyes under his wing, and you know, we've talked about how she clearly sort of is keen on him, and I don't know if I want to say he's been using that, but you know, he certainly hasn't you know, fought against it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I wonder if maybe it's not just that she's, like, you know, maybe they're both sort of bad influences on each other, I guess. Like, you know, they're both in this chapter very much giving into abyss style instincts.
Yeah, but they also, I think, are positive influences on each other as well, right? I think it's a lot
Yeah.
deeper. Like it's harder to track because Blake is obviously having Green Eyes not just kill anybody, right? Which is a good thing. And Green Eyes is kind of acting in a lot of ways, I would say, as a bit of a mirror to Blake of like, you know, Green Eyes is a monster, but you're helping her be better, and so you need to kind of take that lens with yourself as well. I don't know how much he's taking that on board, but he's definitely like, through telling Green Eyes, hey, these are people that are okay to kill, and these are people who aren't, he has to confront that himself in a way that if Green Eyes wasn't around, I would worry that he wouldn't, and would just be a lot more brutal about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just think they're actually on very similar journeys, or they're going through quite similar problems, and perhaps more than Blake has realized. And maybe I feel like I'm saying this about so many things, but maybe that'll be part of his wake up call. I just really want this wake up call to happen. I'm like jumping at anything that could lead to it. Maybe.
Yeah, fair. So the fight rages on, and Green Eyes and Blake win, and Blake only barely feels bad as he brutally murders these people.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, you can kind of assume the necromancer was actually a giant piece of shit, given how his profession works. So I don't feel too bad about that one either. And I think it's a little bit more ambiguous with these other two guys, maybe. But you're right. Like compared to, like, remember when he killed Laird, and like that was one of the most justifiable killing moments ever. And Blake still felt horrible about it, and now there's none of that.
Yeah. It goes further, right? I want to pull out these lines where Blake, as he's saying to one of these people, says, this is Gail's husband. He says, "I wonder why Joyce thought you deserved to die." His eyes widened. "Did you say or do something that she needed to save Gail from you? She was willing to betray her family to get rid of you." This is fucking like evil villain stuff, right?
That's some real super villain monologuing. He's already killed the guy at this point, really. Yeah. Like there is no need for this. This is not putting him on the back foot. He's already got a sword going through his like head or something. Yeah. This is just straight up being a villain.
Yeah.
And I mean, something I think we don't talk enough about, and I just quickly want to do, like, because this fight scene absolutely kicks ass. Like, I hate it because of what Blake is doing, but it kicks ass. Like, and I think maybe that's something we probably don't say enough about some of the fight scenes in Pact, is like they're fantastic spectacles.
Yeah, I think my favorite so far has been the final showdown with Conquest, and this is on par with that. Like, it's so good, and honestly, I think that's because Blake is so confident in his fighting ability here. Like, he actually, he's been getting better and better at the, you know, fucking hand-to-hand or whatever fighting stuff as he came out of the abyss and as he's kind of grown into being a monster. But now he's fully a monster, and he is also just, like, so on point. Like, the hyena is flashing and gutting people, killing people, stabbing through jaws and heads, and he's being rewarded for leaning in.
Yeah, I think that's fair. He fights so well here compared to what he used to be. Like, he's turned, and I mean I think that's partially why I love this fight so much. Is everyone's competent now. It kind of feels like the end of, like, you know, the Harry Potter type story where it's like, oh, and now they're all competent wizards. So it's not Harry being assaulted. It's sort of like people actually fighting back. But of course, Blake kind of sidestepped the whole becoming better at practice, like the practice, and just sort of took an alternate route.
Yep. No downsides shortcut, I think.
I mean, and I love the Avatar practitioners here who can kind of bend elements, basically. I mean, again, on the topic of things that I hate but also actually love, all of Blake's little supervillain monologues to everyone are incredibly fun. Like the bits where he's sort of got the sword to these two brothers, and he's like, "Just tell me you're not evil or you're not monsters by, you know, modern Canadian standards, and I won't kill you." And the guy just can't do it, and it's
again, I don't want Blake's stupid ideas to be reinforced by the fact that these people may have deserved to die, right? Like, that doesn't make it okay, Blake.
Yeah, I hated that this guy not being able to say no kind of validated Blake's validated to him what he was doing, and I was like, no, God, he doesn't need this. Yeah, and so I guess the last thing before we move on from this cool fight is there's a bit where the necromancer sends Blake on another pair of quick excursions to the abyss. I like that these things keep coming in pairs because presumably that means Blake's figuring shit out the third time, which we know is a very good way to do it. But there's some great Lovecraftian horror as he sort of enters the abyss for a bit in a more spiritual way.
Yeah.
Like he sees that giant bat bird monster thing. That's creepy.
Yeah, definitely creepy. Yeah, I don't know what to make of this. Like, I guess it gives him... The way Blake reads it is, this necromancer gives him a vision of his death, and this is what an abyss boogeyman death looks like, which is kind of horrifying.
Yeah. I agree. I'm not entirely sure what to make of everything he sees here, except that, you know, I think this is kind of what his death would look like, and he's not having any of it.
Yeah, not yet. So Green Eyes blurs the line between attacking and feeding here, as she finishes off one of the practitioners by eating his face, and then just kind of is like, let's keep doing that. Continues to eat one of these men, and then kind of reassures Blake that she smelled evil on some of these folks, on the woman specifically, and they 100% deserve to die, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, well, this is that heartbreaking insight into Green Eye's past, because what Blake smells is alcohol. And I mean, honestly, it just reminded me of Tiffany a bit. This idea of I don't know, like alcohol issues in your past. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It gets me really interested in who Green Eyes was before she was Green Eyes.
Yeah. So Blake is kind of unsure whether Green Eye is interpreting that Jan smelled bad or was because she smelled like alcohol or not. Green Eye seems to indicate this isn't it, but Blake I don't think is super sold.
Well, I still got the impression, I was under the impression it's just Green Eyes associates alcohol with bad, which was sort of the heartbreaking side. But you're right, maybe Green Eyes smelt something else. I don't know. Yeah. It made me feel bad because the alcohol angle made me then start to feel sorry for Green Eyes, and I was like, but I shouldn't be feeling sorry for Green Eyes because she just murdered a bunch of people and she's eating them, and like, why do I feel sorry for her right now? It's very confusing.
She's just that kind of character where you just can't help but like her because she's so wholesome, even though she's murdering and eating people as she does it. So yeah, just one other quick note. Evan again is basically silent throughout this entire chapter. I don't know what's in his head.
I'm so interested to see where he's at. Yeah. I was actually thinking, what if he takes Rose's side at the end of this? Like, it'd be pretty funny if, like, you know, the start of the next chapter is just Evan being like, "Hey Rose, I'm on your team again now. These guys are crazy.
Yeah, let's bind them."
And you know, maybe coming from Evan, and if Evan gives a speech to Blake, maybe Blake could see that as the wake-up call he needs and not just... Because, you know, there's two ways he's going to go. If Evan sides with Rose, it's going to be fuck Rose even more, or it's going to be, oh shit, I need to get my shit together.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping it's the latter.
Yeah, I mean, Evan has pretty consistently been the one person who's able to get through to Blake, right? So it does leave me with some hope, but, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
You never know. So... yeah, we get this moment again. Blake, you know, being very cold-hearted. He watches a man desperately trying to heal himself and plucks the healing tool out of him and just snaps it in front of him like, no, you don't get to heal. You're going to die right now.
Yeah, but to be fair, that healing device had a trapped soul in it. So, you know, this necromancer, not a great guy.
Yeah. Still.
Not saying Blake is either. You know, this is the bad fighting the bad at this point, I reckon. But
yeah.
Also, I love how he actually leaves the necromancer like alive and dying. Like he doesn't finish him off, and he thinks, you know, maybe there'll be better karma in that. Which I thought the whole point was we were trying to get rid of that system, Blake. But
maybe if he just works within the system a little bit, Elliot.
I mean, what I love about this as well, and this is how fucking dumb karma is, I'm pretty sure that actually was kind of good karma, because I remember Fell talked about how the reason practitioners didn't use guns is because it's like if you leave a practitioner like with a noose around their neck over ice, then the spirits won't attribute the kill to you as much. Yeah. And so like Blake's doing that a little bit, and I was like, God, I hate karma. That this is a thing that's like, it's better for him to leave this guy slowly dying than to finish him off.
Yeah. It's I mean, I guess it leans into Blake being brutal more, which I love that these systems exist to amplify the the literary horror of this story.
Yeah.
So they move on, leaving a trail of dead Duchamps in their wake, and they run across some Behames. And Blake almost immediately goes on the offensive before he is completely shut down by Alistair and the new Behame superweapon.
Also, there's a boogeyman that ages every step and gives birth to herself, and her placenta turns into a red dress, and I love it. And
Yeah.
I don't have anything insightful to comment here. I love it.
Yeah. I think that, I don't know what it is about time, but time manipulation just comes with its own set of existential horrors that are just so perfect.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So this weapon, this Behame super weapon, which is a giant knight that seems to be some kind of super powerful incarnation of time, something like that.
Yeah, that's the vibe I'm getting. Some sort of super time spirit thing.
Yeah. This thing... So Blake cuts one of these Behames, and this thing reverts time. No perception tricks. It brings back someone from the brink of death after they've been cut by the hyena, which is something that we've kind of had reaffirmed over and over again, even in this very chapter, how difficult that should be, right? Like, the Duchamp practitioner tried to restore himself from being cut by the hyena and failed consistently because the hyena just has this ability to cause, irreparable damage.
Well, and the whole duel he had with Alistair was basically defined by Alistair realizing that if he was cut by the hyena, it would cost a fortune to restore himself.
And so the fact that this super weapon can do that seemingly trivially is a great way to set up, hey, yeah, this super weapon is as hyped up as it should have been. Like, when they were hyping it up in last arc, they were right. This is a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I didn't expect it to be a literal weapon / single person thing. Like, it's dressed up as a knight, which is, I guess weapon makes sense.
Yeah.
But this really steps things up a notch in like my understanding of the Behames, because I thought even with this huge time bank, they were still so limited in some ways, but they're always so confident, and I guess finally now we're sort of seeing, like, I'm interested to learn a bit more about why they kept it hidden behind the curtain.
Yeah, I suspect it's a once you use it, you've used it up kind of deal, or at least you've used it up for a fair amount of time.
Or were they really waiting for the right time to use it?
Yes.
Like the sort of keeping the element of surprise.
Yeah.
So I guess I can't wait to learn more about this crazy time spirit, but there's bigger fish to fry right now, basically.
Yeah, so the ending to this chapter is great because we see this thing that has basically defied all the things that we knew and is clearly so powerful. And Blake is like, that's my second priority. And we don't find out what that means for a few sentences. But
you're like, what?
What the fuck are you talking about? Yeah. But he sees, standing next to Alistair with an engagement ring, is Rose.
I love this. This might be one of my favorite twists in the book so far. Like, this just caught me so incredibly off guard.
Isn't it? So fucking good.
Yeah, it makes, but it adds, it adds up. Totally makes sense. Didn't see it coming at all. This is good. This was such a fantastic what the fuck moment.
Yeah. I just want to point out when Blake sees them, Alistair and Rose standing next to each other, he says, they almost matched in height and sheer pretentiousness standing side by side, which is just like such a Blake thing. Like, clearly Rose being away for a while has not made him miss her. How does someone stand with pretentiousness, Blake? Come on.
To be fair, if anyone can do it, it's probably Rose and
Rose and Alistair, yeah.
I can't wait to see where it goes from here. This is a fantastic development, and finally kind of justifies, I think, to me, why the Behames thought they could be with a shot if they sort of had this as an option. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think Johannes and the Duchamps were the players that were poised to win this, right? With the Behames and the Thorburns being the ones that were going to lose along the way to provide a bit of an obstacle. I mean, that's really what the power structure seemed to be.
No, the environment was set up so it felt like, as you said, Sandra and Johannes were sort of the front runners, the safer bets, and then there were sort of the Behames and the Thorburns acting like wild cards.
Yeah. And what better thing for two wild cards to do than to join forces?
What's funny, like the idea of them being together, like just the fact now that it's not everyone versus the Thorburns, and the Thorburns won't always be on the run because the Behaims are so established in the town. It honestly makes me feel like we've gone from the Behaims and Thorburns as individual units. I was like, oh, well, neither of them have a very good chance of winning unless they do something really stupid too. Now they're together, I'm like, wow, I don't think Johannes and the Duchamps teamed up will be able to stop them. Like it feels like such an effective combination. It's like they shore up each other's weaknesses. And the Behaims were the only ones who had any sort of defense against the demons. So it's just...
Yeah, I want to touch on that as well, because the whole story, we've had these beats of generations of Behaims and Thorburns, like, mingling, right? First with Eamon and Rose Senior, and then there was some weirdness around Blake and Laird that felt like there was something else going on there that never fully got realized. And now we have Rose and Alistair, and it feels like it's all fitting into place so perfectly.
Yeah, you're right. These two families have been bouncing off each other for a few generations now. Oh god, I can't wait. I just want to. I'm like upset that there's an interlude right now because we're not going to jump straight into this next scene. I think, unless it's like a Rose interlude or something. But also, I love interludes so much. So what I hate is our stupid schedule, which means I can only read 2 chapters a week.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the end of this, right? There's an interlude coming along next.
Yep.
And we'll see how we go. Before we wrap up, though, it's time to revisit our discussion question, which we've been running for the past week, where we were talking about the kind of fundamental elements and giving people a chance to explore some of the characters in this story and how what fundamental element might represent them, as Blake seems to be represented by wood. And we got a few interesting answers, and I want to pull some out here. And the first one I want to talk about is Isha Morden's answer, which I absolutely loved, talking about Rose as metal. And this is something that made so much sense to me that actually I think the idea of the elements was just introduced for this reason, honestly. Because Rose as metal is... kind of defines and is defined by what we've heard of metal and wood and their relationship. Metal being the newer element, the fundamental element that is, replacing wood. And obviously that has some implications for Rose and Blake's relationship. But I want to pull out a few kind of comparisons that Isha Morden makes here. So metal is kind of worked as an artistry. Rose being, a good example of this because she is so kind of composed and proper. Composed as in she's composed, but also as in she has been composed. She has been created, right?
I also, we talked about like metal as an element has come up as refined earth.
Yeah.
It's like you take the raw earth and you sculpt something pure out of it. And if we are working off the assumption that Rose was the intended heir, that obviously adds up.
Yeah, 100%. I also like the comparison of metal and wood as things that were used in similar ways over time. Like obviously both used to make tools, both used to build structures. But metal is stronger. Metal is better. But it's also colder, right? It doesn't come from a living thing. It comes from a ore. It's refined and it's not alive, and it never was alive, which is great. Wooden tools are more disposable, whereas metal tools are more permanent. Blake and Rose. I mean, it's so perfect. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting, have I gotten this mixed up, or... So we had that original thing, this is way back in Arc 1, when they were awakening, where didn't Rose have like holly and holly berries as something in her awakening ritual, and Blake had the iron?
Yeah.
And obviously now we know that like Rose kind of intentionally fucked hers up. But there's some interesting imagery there where Rose messed hers up by using wood, and Blake was successul using metal, considering...
yeah, I love that.
We're effectively saying now they represent the opposites.
Yeah. And of course, when Blake was out of the mirror, he used iron, and while Rose was in the mirror, she used holly, right? Now they've swapped places. I mean, maybe the answer is, if Rose was the one who was still in the mirror and went to the abyss, she would come out as a being made of wood. and Blake would be the metal one. But that's just not where the chips have fallen.
Yeah, maybe. I wonder if Blake does an awakening ritual with Holly, if it somewhat works on Vestiges. He's probably too far gone for that, never mind.
Yeah, I think that ship has sailed.
Need to be at least 2% human for that to work. So the other great answer was from Brawl97, who talks about Peter, our favourite Thorburn that we love to hate.
Hell yeah.
So, like Peter, he's slippery. He's adaptable. Like, obviously, that's a great fit for sort of water. No, sorry. I kept going. I guess I must have cut out for a sec. Sorry. I'll just start again. So Peter, he's slippery and adaptable, which I think is like a great fit for water. I also liked Brawl's note that like water fills space as needed, which I think, we've seen Peter really slip into various roles in his life very well. Like, I think that's actually a great insight. Obviously, and he filled the house with water. There's a literal connection there. That's not Brawl 97. That's my great input.
I had the same thought as well, and I was like, oh, I like this, but I don't think it's like a very strong metaphor. It's just a fun coincidence. Yeah.
And then the other thing Brawl 97 says, Peter keeps a cool head, which, is a water thing.
Yep. Yeah, cool like water. So they say.
Yeah. And so then I guess last thing we want to touch on here, I was very upset that nobody did Mags, so I did Mags. And I think, so I've labelled Mags as Earth as an element, and I think Earth is an element in Pact. As I got started on this, I was like suddenly unsure if Earth is actually one of the elements.
Yeah.
Because as far as I can remember, we've only had water, fire, air, metal, and wood discussed. I don't know what the full element situation is in Pact.
Yeah.
I guess if things like wood and metal can sort of be replacing each other, it's Pact. It's not set in stone. It's fluid, and there's probably even like minor elements and stuff.
Yep. Uranium, that's an element.
Yeah. In fact, like Tiff mentioned that the awakening ritual, part of the awakening ritual is you make sacrifices to the major elements. I briefly went back and reread the awakening rituals, and I couldn't figure out, just off a brief skim, which part of the awakening ritual is the element bits.
Because there's stuff that seems to be death, time, like focused on like fundamental forces as well. And so maybe there's some blend between elements and forces in that way. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, Tiff sort of gave a list. She's like, part of the awakening is to the local spirits, parts to like the major forces, parts to the elements.
Right.
Like she sort of, so yeah. And it was just, I from a very brief skim, I couldn't actually tell which part was which. Anyway, but so assuming Earth is a valid element, I think it fits Mags, because one thing Buttsack talked about was in his section of signature was this idea that the Earth is always calling to goblins because they're scrap and it wants to decompose them. And obviously, if Earth is connected to goblins, I think it's probably connected to Mags, because we talked so much about how her being around goblins has influenced her.
Yeah.
And then like I also think that somewhat applies that idea of like the Earth wanting to gravitate towards things that are, needing to be decomposed or whatever, sort of aligns with this whole idea of how Mags has sort of shored herself up.
Yeah.
With this role of ambassador.
Yeah, you're right. She's not whole,
Yeah, yeah. And then there's nothing in Pact to support this, but like usually in most works of fiction, Earth is the element that's all about like being stubborn and blunt.
Yeah, unmoving.
Yeah, and that's Mags.
Yeah.
I think that just sums her up really well.
Actually, the only thing that can get through to Earth is water, right? Like, classically, the only thing that moves Earth is water through erosion. So that means, I'm calling it now, there's a new ship on the horizon.
Oh,
Peter and Mags.
Thanks, I hate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so I guess moving on, we're going to
let's move on quick.
We're going to have another discussion question coming up over the next week. So this will be due in 13.1.
Yes. Yeah, 13.1 or 2, depending on if we have a bonus.
We don't. So 13.1.
Okay, cool.
And so this discussion question is, we've criticised Blake for not having an alternative plan about what he could replace the current system with. What improvements do you think could reasonably be made to the world of Pact? So basically, Blake's done a shit job of explaining what he actually wants to fix, and we're interested to hear what your ideas are about what he could actually do to fix this.
Yeah, if we're going to break the system, what's the new system?
Yeah, like, do you just go anarchy and tear it all down, or do you try and patch it? Like, what do you do?
Hot fix it. So yeah,
Seal of Solomon 1.1.
If you have an answer to that discussion question, the perfect place to leave it is in our discussion thread, which you can find linked down below in the episode description.
Yes. And if you want to reach us another way, we're on Twitter at MediaMD Podcast. It's where I do the live reads. It's where we interact with people that's not read it. So check it out. Yeah.
If you want to support the show, a great way to do that is to leave us a review on your podcasting service of choice. Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, the other ones as well. If you could leave us a review, that would be very helpful because it helps spread the love.
Yes. And if you want to learn more about Doof Media and the other shows on the Doof Media Network, doofmedia.com, that's where you go. I think today, coming out at the same time as this episode, is the Doofcast episode where they're deconstructing M. Night's The Visit.
Yeah.
Which I think we saw together,
We did.
Actually.
This was
I really liked it.
The movie that brought M. Night back into not being a joke.
Yeah, I really liked this. Like, I'm keen to listen to this episode because I haven't seen the movie since it came out, but I remember, it had been a while since M. Night had a successful one of his formulaic movies, which was just a horror movie with a earth-shattering twist. And I thought the twist in The Visit really worked.
Well, this is interesting. So I'm pretty sure I remember in the last deconstructing episode that they did that everyone thinks that there was a gap between After Earth and, The Visit. But actually, the gap was basically consistent. So it just feels like M. Night was gone for a while and then came back. But actually...
Oh, no, that's absolutely... I wasn't implying he wasn't making movies. I was implying there was a gap in his movies that are worth seeing.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I just... The narrative of M. Night Shyamalan is one that is so interesting to me. I've really been enjoying the Deconstructing Directors series, so I recommend you listen to the whole thing, and especially this episode that comes out today, The Visit, because I'm sure that'll be a good one.
Yes.
If you want to support the Doof Media Network, doing things like this deep dive on M. Night, these things are only possible because of the lovely support of all our patrons. And if you'd like to be one of those lovely patrons, the place to go is patreon.com/doofmedia. Backing the network for any amount of dollars a month will already get you some great perks like access to the Discord and some other really cool stuff. So yeah, thank you for caring.
And if you've ever thought to yourself, I need more full body degloving in my life, head on over to patreon.com/Wildbo because he's the one bringing the top quality full body degloving to your inbox.
Yeah.
So,
I hear if we get 1,000 new backers this week, then he's going to write a full degloving short story.
Is that meant to incentivize people?
No. I mean, he's not going to. If we have 1,000 new, he's not going to write it. Otherwise, he is, and he's going to make you all read it.
Look, we'll be back, and I guess I'll understand if you won't after that. For Duress 12.8 on Friday the 1st
it's a histories. It's a histories arc, Elliot. So I'm excited for it. We'll see you all then.
See ya.